Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. No rumors today, though, just hard news and lots of it about PlayStation 5. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast Beyond.
Beyond, Damon. So much has happened.
A very hearty Beyond to you as well. And Ryan McCaffrey, he hosts IGN's Xbox Podcast Unlocked.
No more secrets. Finally.
No. It's all on the table. Today, we're going to be talking about everything Sony revealed about PlayStation 5 this week. And it was a lot. We finally have price and release dates for PS5, both consoles, actually. And as of this taping, pre-orders are just starting to go live. Some of us here at IGN have started securing their pre-orders. I believe both Ryan and Jonathan have. Is that correct?
Yes.
My credit card got charged, so I hope one shows up on November 12th.
Hopefully, a few will still be available right after this taping for me. We learned more about the PS5 launch lineup, which is pretty impressive. We'll talk about specific game announcements like Demon's Souls, God of War Ragnarok, Final Fantasy 16 in just a minute. But let's begin with the price and release date for PlayStation 5. $500 for the disc version, $400 for the discless version. Starts rolling out November 12th for territories like the US, Japan, but a few others. By November 19th, it'll hit the rest of the territories. So, Jonathan, first of all, give me your reaction. $500, $400. How do you think that sort of stacks up as compared to Xbox Series, which is $500 and $300 for the S?
I think it's really great. I predicted both of those price points and was one day off on the release date. I guessed November 13th instead of November 12th, but I think those price points make a lot of sense, especially because functionally outside of the disk drive, they're the same console. They have the same SSD, the same storage space, all the same inner workings. So you're essentially just deciding whether or not you want to buy a digital edition and just focus on digital downloads, or if you want a disk drive to also play 4K Blu-rays and disc-based games, of course. The digital edition, probably Sony would prefer you to buy, but that's another discussion. I think the price point makes sense because at the end of the day, both of these systems, at least in my mind, are, if you want to say direct competitors, they are competing with the Series X when it comes, I think, to people's mind share, whereas I do think Microsoft is aiming the Series S at a different audience than either the PS5 or the Series X when it comes to what that demographic should be who may want a Series S. So I think these price points work really well. I think they're pretty fair for what we're getting. I think it's a smart entry point, and I'm just glad they didn't go above Microsoft. I was a little worried there, but staying competitive at this price point, I think is a really solid win for them.
Yeah, and I was a little surprised that there's a full $100 difference between the disc and discless version. I would be surprised if that disc drive cost $100 to manufacture. Ryan, what was your reaction to the news today, PlayStation 5 price?
Number one, I am just kind of amused that after this long game of chicken that these two companies played, we didn't hear the prices until September for November console releases. They ended up being the same price for the top end SKUs. Which I just kind of chuckle inside at. But I agree. I was very pleasantly surprised at the $399 price for PS5 digital. I was already thinking of going that way. All my games now are digital as it is. Now there are trade-offs, of course. If a big box retailer puts a disc version of a game on sale a couple months after release, few months out, drops it to like $20-$30, you cannot take advantage of that. You are beholden to digital game prices. So there are certainly trade-offs to going digital, but the $100 difference, I thought it was going to be $450, just a $50 difference on that version. So I think the digital is a very interesting choice. You're getting a full powered PlayStation 5 for $400, whereas on the Microsoft side, of course, Microsoft has very consciously gone with a lower powered machine. Well, it's just a lower resolution machine. They've gone with a 1440p machine for $300, which is still a tremendous value. So I think there's the Series S, at least for this audience and for I think a lot of people, for a PlayStation gamer, the Series S is still a phenomenal option as a second console. As hey, maybe I wasn't really thinking about jumping into Xbox, but man, $300 for Series S, and it'll upscale to 4K, even if if you do have a 4K TV and Game Pass. I mean, so there's still a ton of value there and a lot of appeal in the Series S. But I think it's just great to see that $399 price point on the PS5 digital as well for anybody that does want to take that option. That's less than I thought it would be.
Now we're starting to learn more about the PlayStation 5 launch lineup, which is looking very impressive. Probably one of the best launch lineups a PlayStation console has ever had. We'll talk about that in just a second. But that aside, Jonathan, Microsoft apparently has the more powerful console with Series X, and then they also have a less expensive option with Series S, a full $100 cheaper than PS5 digital. Should that concern Sony at all? Now, this is, of course, not considering their launch lineups.
Of course, yeah. Personally, at least for launch, I don't think so. I think it comes down to a few pieces of information. Yes, the Xbox Series X is more powerful on paper, and I think that's going to translate to some really great stuff when it is really designed around the Xbox Series X and taking full advantage of it. I think probably at least at launch, especially when we're getting a lot of games cross-gen, the PS5 and Series X versions are going to be pretty comparable. And so me as a person who's going to buy a PlayStation 5 first and then consider my Xbox options, I'm not really worried that I'm going to be missing out on a lot when it comes to the third-party offerings on a power level. That might, as we go down the line, obviously the One X was more powerful than the PS4 Pro, and it really started to show as the years went on. And so I think a few years down the line, we may be talking about something that really you see a difference with. But at least for me, and I think the average player, it's not as big of a concern. And then when it comes to the price point, for me personally, I agree with you, Ryan. The $300 price point really does offer a really nice entry point for someone who may not have been thinking of getting an Xbox, but may also want to get one on top of a PS5. But for me personally, I care more about resolution than frame rate, actually. So I would rather get the Series X for having the true 4K native experience rather than you saving $200 at that base and just going all in for that higher, more powerful console. But I think it really depends on your personal preference. So for people who don't care as much and you do want something that has resolution, buying the Series S as a secondary console, if you are primarily a PlayStation player, is a really smart move, I think, and is a really intelligent decision on Microsoft's part to get people in the door who may not have otherwise.
Agreed. And I think it's really going to be interesting once these consoles launch to do like a blind taste test with maybe more casual gamer friends, family members, put the same game on Series S and Series X. One's upscaled to 4K and the other one's native 4K, and like see if they can obviously tell a difference. Now, of course, there is a difference. I'm not trying to sit here and say there's no difference, but I'm arguing in favor of the value proposition of the Series S. Like if that upscaler is good from 1440p to 4K, it could really just be a great option for a lot of people, more so than we might be thinking about.
I think for me at the end of the day, and granted that it's a strange year to be having all of these discussions, is we really haven't seen that many examples when it comes to, direct Series X to PS5 comparisons or Series S to Series X. We just haven't been exposed to as much because all we've been able to get is streams or YouTube videos rather than in-person events and a lot of really hands-on experience.
I mean, we've hardly seen anything running on either console directly, period. So to your exact point.
If I remember correctly, back in 2013, these two consoles launched a week apart, I want to say. This year, they're arriving the same week, 2 days apart. Xbox Series on November 10th, and then PlayStation 5 on November 12th. So, man, what a week that is going to be, huh?
A wallet crushing week for sure.
Same week as Assassin's Creed Valhalla coming out, same day as the Xbox, and then Call of Duty on Friday. And then Cyberpunk, of course, the week after. It's going to be a very busy time.
It's going to be an exciting month. Okay, let's talk about games that were shown off this week. Jonathan, you reviewed Spider-Man on PlayStation 4. We finally got to see a long gameplay demo of Spider-Man Miles Morales on PS5 today. What did you think? I thought it looked awesome.
I loved it. Yeah, one of the biggest things for me about making Miles the protagonist and having you play as him, I think, is he does have some different powers. He does have some different special abilities, but at least where he is in his career versus Peter is in the original Spider-Man game, he's a little more new to all of this. And so he's a little less rehearsed in practice and everything. And so they really showed off a different mobility to the way he moved, to the way he attacked and dodged and sort of just weaved his way around the environment. And I appreciated all these little, both large and small touches they were doing to really make Miles seem unique and different as a playable character versus Peter. And yeah, that the bridge sequence really excited me. I thought it felt like very classic Spider-Man, but I can't wait for the full game.
Yeah, I thought it looked awesome. Ryan, did you get a chance to check it out?
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. I will say though, I think it's been a little, now in hindsight, unfair, a lot of the roasting that Microsoft took for their cross-gen approach, when it turns out Sony's doing the exact same thing with Spider-Man Miles Morales and Horizon Forbidden West. So it's like, they're both doing it. So, maybe let's give Microsoft a break on their cross-gen approach, because it turns out, Sony was, I don't know if I would call it active deception from the first June PlayStation event, but all of a sudden here, 2 months before launch, oh, by the way, it's also coming out on PS4. And so is this other major anticipated first-party game that we showed off at the June event. But that aside, it does create an interesting opportunity on both consoles to really compare the current gen version of these games to the next gen version, to sort of see, all right, does then the Series X's greater teraflop number, does that additional power come into play? Are we going to see that on the screen when we're going from Xbox One and One X to the Series X versus games that are going from PS4 or PS4 Pro to PS5? So that is a new wrinkle that Sony just threw in for us today. That again, I think we've got to call them out for after Microsoft took a bit of a beating for it in the public space. But also now it'll be neat to watch and see how the current gen to next gen difference is across these first party games.
Yeah, my biggest issue with it, I think, and Ryan, I'm totally with you. I think it's totally fair to knock them for us, is because they spent so many months, really most of this year, saying we believe in generations, and then to say, but we believe in generations starting in like late 2021. That's
right.
Like presumably God of War Ragnarok, which we can get to later. That was not confirmed for PS4 and seems to be PS5 only, at least at this juncture. But who knows? But it seems like they kind of have this cutoff window of the first 6 to 12 months of the PS5 will have PS4 cross compatibility. And yeah, it is that weird thing of why were they saying that wouldn't be the case really when it would be? And it is a little frustrating. And I definitely do think for players who were like, well, I'm going to have to buy a PS5 for Miles. Now you don't have to. If you do have a PS4, you can play Miles. And it makes sense on a business level. I just wish they hadn't been so flip-floppy about talking about it, because why not sell a sequel to one of your most successful exclusives to 100 million plus install base? That just makes financial sense. But they didn't have to go about it pretending like that wasn't going to be the case.
Yeah, in the case of Miles Morales, I wonder that if it's maybe it's just a simple business decision as Sony being as well. If we put it on PS4 as well, we can sell an additional 10 million copies.
Well, but they didn't decide this in the last 2 months. This has been that's not how game development works. So it's like this has been the plan, and Sony just wasn't. It's like Microsoft got burned for their honesty, basically, which is really a shame to see.
Yeah, well, no, Ryan, I do think they just saved the Miles Morales files as .ps4 and then were able to transfer it over. But yeah, they did also
save as. Yeah.
They confirmed that they're also bringing a remastered version of Spider-Man 1 to PS5 that's supposedly taking advantage of all the new assets they're using with Miles Morales. So that will also be another curious point of comparison, where this is the first sort of
Is that a free upgrade, Jonathan, for PS4 Spider-Man owners?
I don't know if they've mentioned free upgrade yet, actually. It is a free upgrade for Miles Morales if you buy it on PS4 to PS5. I do need to double check on the Spider-Man side of it, but that comes bundled with the Ultimate Edition of Miles Morales. So that will be an interesting case study as well.
The fact that Horizon Forbidden West is also coming to PS4 is even more surprising to me, because we don't even know when that is coming out, right? That could be mid-2021. Yeah,
they've right now said slated for 2021. I wouldn't be surprised if it's an early, first half of the year launch. And, it's been a while since Horizon first came out, 2017, February. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe they started production looking at PS4 and then realized there was a way to move to PS5. And so they're just taking advantage of both. Again, Horizon was hugely successful as a new IP on PS4. And so before Ghost of Tsushima, it was the, I think, fastest selling new IP of the generation. So it just makes sense to want to play to that base. But yeah, like Ryan was saying, I wish they just hadn't pretended like that wasn't going to be the case, because that is 100 million plus people. They can say, hey, you will still get this game.
Okay. This week, Sony also announced PlayStation Plus Collection. which seems to be a similar feature to Game Pass on Xbox. It's an additional benefit to PlayStation Plus subscribers, which gives you access to an impressive library of games, a lot of first-party games from last generation that Sony put out, Days Gone and God of War, and is Horizon Zero Dawn in there as well? Jonathan, do you remember?
I believe so, but I will double check.
And there's also a bunch of third-party games on there too. So that's it's all going to be there at launch for PlayStation 5. So that's very cool. Ryan, what did you make of the announcement of PlayStation Plus Collection? Could it be a serious contender to Game Pass?
No, it's a step in the right direction for sure. But it's for now. I don't know if they've said if it's going to include PS5 games as well, but it appears to just be basically a backwards compatible vault, which is great. But Game Pass has brand new titles from first party and from a number of third parties launching into it day and date. I mean, that was everything from Microsoft's July showcase is going right into Game Pass. So yeah, definitely a step in the right direction from Sony. Is it on Game Pass's level? No, absolutely not, and not as of yet.
Well, the PlayStation 5 launch lineup is looking very impressive. We've known we're going to have Spider-Man Miles Morales. They confirmed this week that Demon Souls will be there at launch. What is it? Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition is going to be available to download at launch. You'll have everything from the PlayStation Plus collection. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is a launch window game. Astro's Playroom comes installed on it. Godfall is an exclusive. They have Sackboy. It's an impressive lineup. I think it's easily better than the PlayStation 4 lineup. Ryan, it's got to be frustrating for Xbox fans. The narrative all along this generation is that Xbox doesn't have the exclusives, but we know that they were trying. We know they've been buying up these studios. They announced Halo Infinite was going to be their big launch game, but then it's just like when it comes down to it, when it comes to the launch, now they don't have any of that stuff. It's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, when Xbox fans have been told their games are coming, the games are coming, and that's still the message. We're still, yes, we saw a lot of great trailers and reveals at the July event for Fable, for Avowed, et cetera, et cetera. So they will come, but unfortunately, that's still the message. We're still waiting at the bus stop, waiting for the exclusives bus to roll up. And you compare that, I think the PS5 exclusive launch lineup is solid. I don't maybe think quite as highly of it as you guys, but I do think conversely, the year one exclusive lineup for PlayStation 5 is incredible between Miles Morales, Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet and Clank, and we just got told that God of War 2, God of War Ragnarok, whatever it's going to be called, is a 2021 game. So, in the first year to have 4 major first-party exclusives from studios that have all done renowned, tremendous games. I mean, that's a hell of a year one. And Microsoft has no response to that in the exclusive department. Again, everything is much further out. Halo Infinite is the only major 2021 title. I mean, I certainly expect Psychonauts 2, which, Tim Schafer always does great stuff, and Double Fine. But yeah, I mean, that year one PlayStation 5 lineup is really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to the first party lineup, they continue to secure these console exclusives like Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah.
That was rumored going into this event. I was actually a little bit surprised that it turned out to be true. I thought the trailer that we saw today looked pretty cool. It looks like a little bit darker entry in the Final Fantasy series. Ryan, is that another? It is literally something that Xbox gamers will miss out on. But how important do you think that is?
It's there. I don't think there's any one game that's like, well, I'm totally going PlayStation now, but they all add up. Sony keeps doing this. They've Deathloop was another one. I think that was supposed to be a launch game and then they delayed it. You've got Deathloop, you've got Project Aria, I think was the name of it, from Square Enix. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and then and Final Fantasy 16. So it's like these things all add up to where you're like, it's not that you're going to say, well, forget Xbox. Like, you might want to hopefully get an Xbox too, because there's good stuff on there, but you're going to look at PlayStation and go, well, I got to have that. They've got a lot of great games on there, and you can bemoan the the way that Sony's going about it by locking these games up and keeping them off of other platforms for either a set amount of time or forever. But it's like, I mean, you can say it's fighting dirty, and maybe it is, but it's business. It works. It works. Yeah. And look at the results of the PlayStation 4 generation. I mean, the installed base numbers speak for themselves. So yeah, I mean, there are plenty of Xbox fans out there that would look at that and go, well, gosh, I wish Microsoft were putting up that same kind of effort and going to get some big exclusives for us too. And Microsoft has their philosophy is to not do that. And they want to be gaming on every platform. And there's a ton of merit in that. I mean, look what they're doing with xCloud. I mean, it's incredible. That launched this week, by the way. If you have an Android device, you can play your Xbox games anywhere, like on your phone with a bunch of various official third-party devices. Like, that's insane. And not a lot of people are talking about that yet. I think people will be talking about that over the coming year. But yeah, it's really wild to just see the divergent philosophies that we're seeing between these two big competitors.
Mm-hmm. Jonathon, anything to wrap us up? I know it's a very exciting week for PlayStation.
Yeah, it's a lot to discuss, and we'll definitely be having a lot of follow-ups on IGN. Yeah, I'll definitely say, Ryan, just quickly to your point, I think xCloud, it was a really big thing this week that unfortunately has kind of been buried. I think it'll get a lot more time when we're able to go out of our homes and have reasons to play from the cloud away from our TV. But yeah, it is, like you said, we are really seeing different philosophies to a pretty staggering degree that we usually only see kind of from Nintendo when it comes to this. You know, for the last few generations, by and large, Microsoft and Sony have been playing the same game. And while I do think by playing the same game largely going into next gen, PlayStation is going to have an upper hand when we start the year off, you know, and start going into the launches and whatnot in year one. I do think we're going to see different stories really start to develop, and both companies really measuring their success in different ways as we go through these next few years. Microsoft very clearly cares about the overarching family of places you can play Xbox, and they care more about their services right now. And they're really, really pushing that message. And it is very different from PlayStation saying you need to come to the PlayStation 5 to play these games, aside from Miles and Horizon. But it is clearly very different philosophies. And I'm just excited to see how those play out, because like Ryan was saying, it is a different story to be told than what we've had for the last few generations.
All right, we've obviously been talking a lot about PlayStation 5 this episode, but last week we were talking a lot about Xbox Series S, the cheapest of the next-gen consoles. We ran a poll on IGN asking you, does the $300 price tag raise your interest in the Xbox Series S console? The winning response was, no, I'm sticking with PS5. That was 36%, but almost 27% of you said yes, your interest has been piqued in the cheaper version of the Xbox. And it's just like both of you, Ryan and Jonathon, were saying, it's fairly likely a lot of PlayStation gamers, some ways along the line, will decide to pick up an Xbox Series S as their secondary console, because it does appear to still be a very good value. Before we go, we have a poll for you to vote on for next week. We want to know, now that all the cards are on the table, we have the price and release date for both PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. Which next-gen console will you purchase first? PS5 disc version, PS5 digital, Series X, Series S. Vote at IGN.com, and we will share the results with you next week. Whew. That was a lot for this week. That will do it for this episode of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Jonathon. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X/S news and rumors. We'll see you then.